Dear friends, although I was very eager to write to you about the salvation we share, I felt compelled to write and urge you to contend for the faith that was once all entrusted to God's holy people.
Hello once again and welcome to another episode of Standing Firm Defenders of Faith. I am one of your hosts, Candace Paul, and I am here with David Chandler, my co-host. And what we're going to do is follow up on a previous discussion we had on spiritual warfare. So David wanted to get into a little bit more detail about the occult and how that is also a part of this whole idea of spiritual warfare. So David, just let us know what's going on.
Well, thank you, Candace, for having me on the show, first of all, and it's a pleasure to do these recordings with you. It's very important to know what we're facing in these last days. We need to know our enemy. You know, you go into the military and you face an enemy and you don't know, you won't be able to defeat him unless you know his tactics. The Bible says that for our weapons, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers, and the rulers of darkness of this world and spiritual wickedness in high places. But before that, Paul also instructs us to put on the whole armor of God. Now again, Paul is talking about war. He's talking about warfare. Putting on the whole armor of God that ye may stand against the wiles or the schemes of the devil. So in order for us to do that, we have to know our enemy. And the occult seems to be the enemy's territory. You look at Deuteronomy chapter 18 and verses 10. And before I get into that, I'm pretty sure a lot of the people that are listening want to know, what is the occult? What does it mean?
Yes.
Well, the occult in the Latin is occultus, which means hidden or secret. Doesn't mean dark or evil, just means secret knowledge. And what are the practices of the occult? What is that? Well, for us to know what that is, we have to look in the Word of God. And in Deuteronomy chapter 18, and let me grab my Bible, and I'm going to start at verse 10. Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 10. And it says here, there shall not be found among you anyone that maketh his son or daughter to pass through the fire, or that useth divination, or an observer of times, or an enchanter or a witch. Now, let's go back again. Let's back up. Let's backtrack here. There shall not be found among you anyone that maketh his son or his daughter to pass through the fire. Now, that's child sacrifice. That's not walking on coals barefoot. That's child sacrifice. During I think it was in a town or a city called, I know it's called Tophet, or the Valley of the Son of Hinnom. I'm sorry, yes, this Valley of the Son of Hinnom. I think that's in 1st or 2nd Kings. Valley of the Son of Hinnom, and it's also known as Tophet. And there you had cremation, you had the continual ritual murders of hundreds of innocent children. And what would happen is the priest would take the baby and place it on the altar of these statues of whatever devil that they've worshipped, and that their hands would be red hot, and so they would put the baby on the hands, and the baby would be screaming, and of course they would drown out the screams of that baby by the pounding of the drum, and of course it would be demon possession and fornication and all kinds of evil there. But that's what that is.
Wow.
And number 2 is use of divination. Divination basically is crystal balls, looking into the mirror. You know, I'm pretty sure you've heard of the little game that we used to play, you know, Bloody Mary. You say it Bloody Mary maybe 7 or 8 times, and you look in the mirror and she would appear behind you. That's a form of divination.
Oh, wow.
Divination is also using the usage of tarot cards, Ouija boards to summon up familiar spirits, or an observer of times, which is astrology, you know, the study of the stars in order to gain knowledge. Or an enchanter, which is a hypnotist, or a witch, which is pretty much self-explanatory. A witch is basically a female practitioner of the arts, of the dark arts.
The dark arts, yeah.
Chapter 11, or a charmer, or a consulter with familiar spirits. I've already explained what that is. That's, you know, Ouija boards, tarot cards, mediums. You ever heard of the show Medium, starring Patricia Arquette, Ghost Whisperer, played by Jennifer Love Hewitt? She was summoning familiar spirits, those that would come back from the dead that were killed recently, and those people would come back and tell her that, well, you know, this person killed me, so he needs to go back, he needs to face justice for me to rest in peace. Or a wizard. A wizard is a male practitioner of the arts. The word wizard comes from the Old English word, which means wise one or teacher. And it's derived from the word Wicca, the religion Wicca, which was founded by Gerald Gardner during the 1800s, and it just means wise one or teacher. It's not warlock; it's wizard.
And what?
Or witch.
And explain warlock, because I've heard that term before.
Well, warlock, a lot of people say that warlock is a male practitioner, but there's no such thing as, it's the wrong terminology. The correct terminology is wizard.
Okay.
There's two practitioners, a man and a woman. A man is a wizard, a woman is a witch.
Interesting.
That's the right terminology. There is no such thing as a warlock. And as a matter of fact, a lot of true occultists don't use the word, and sometimes they'll use it for shock value, but there's no such thing as a warlock.
And it's so interesting how all of the things that you just named are very much embedded in our culture. It's very much everyday. People are used to this. People see it in entertainment, television, film, in books. And it's very much a part of our culture now, American culture. You know, there's nothing really taboo about it anymore. And it's become very mainstream. So what do you think about that?
Well, yeah, it's pretty much embedded in the culture, especially within entertainment. And again, I told you before yesterday, I write. I'm a novelist. I write science fiction, fantasy, and I'm now a little bit more careful as to the type of work that I do. I used to write horror stories earlier when I started writing. I think it was during my 20s, and I was I hadn't started college yet, but I was trying to find my niche in the literary world, and I started out writing a lot of superhero stuff, space opera and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I branched over because I had groups and teams and all that, and they would possess all kinds of abilities. And then all of a sudden, I started branching over into the, horror stories. And I would have a list of horror stories of titles within that genre to write about. And I wrote one story. It was called Terror in a Small Town. It was sort of kind of like a slasher book or novel or whatever the case may be. And then I started getting deeper into the supernaturalism and demons and things of that sort, and I had to back off. I stopped when I was, I think, around 25. I didn't write any more of those stories because they were beginning to affect me psychologically, spiritually.
Interesting.
And so I went back to superheroes. I went back to characters that possessed powers and things of that sort, and I was very careful to kind of stay away from those that realm. And even if I were to write, like I know we've discussed the series that I was working on. It was a vampire series, but they're not all powerful. I'm not making them all powerful. They're not so powerful, strong that they cannot be stopped. And they're not glorified. These types of individuals are not placed on a pedestal to where they cannot be beaten. So in a lot of your popular movies and your television shows like Charmed, which was pretty popular during the 90s, you had Bewitched, which was pretty popular during the 1960s. You had Rosemary's Baby, and like I said, when I told you something about the Hays Code, which was a part of the Motion Picture Association of America, which started in 1930, and during that time, Christian screenwriters and Christian film directors would screen the actors, and these actors had to have some sort of Christian belief or some Christian background, otherwise they could not act. And even if they didn't, they were not allowed to make fun or blaspheme God or Christianity in any way. So all of this stuff started waning around the 1950s, I'd say around the mid to late 1950s, with Greta Garbo and Marilyn Monroe. And then you had Jayne Mansfield. Jayne Mansfield was pretty popular during the 60s. And around 1968, the Hays Code just disappeared. The church left Hollywood, and the Church of Satan came in. And this was around the time where Anton LaVey was collaborating with a lot of your film directors, Roman Polanski, Kenneth Anger, and Bobby Beausoleil was an actor, and he and Kenneth Anger, I believe, were lovers, if I'm not mistaken, and they were in cahoots with one another. And of course, Bobby Beausoleil played in a movie called Lucifer Rising, Invocation of My Demon Brother, which was, of course, directed by Kenneth Anger. And you had Rosemary's Baby, which came out in 1968. And of course, in 1969, well, of course, by this time, the Church of Satan had already been established. And Kenneth Anger was a co-founder of that particular organization. By 1969, the Church of Satan had already been established and had a footing, and Satanism had a footing in the culture. And so the Satanic Bible was published around 1969. And of course, they came out with the 9 Satanic Statements. And I'm not going to get into that right now. But around 1973, William Peter Blatty came out with a novel known as The Exorcist. And of course, the occult just blossomed. Stephen King with his stories. I used to be a hardcore Stephen King fan. Used to
Mm-hmm.
watch all of his movies, Misery, It. By the way, that came out as a remake. I think it was last year,
Oh,
or
yes,
maybe a
it
couple
did.
of months ago. Yeah, something like that. But Storm of the Century, which was a short story written by Stephen King. All kinds of stuff. I used to be a hardcore Stephen King fan. I was into horror. I used to watch a lot of the slasher films of the 1980s, Friday the 13th, Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, Child's Play,
Mm-hmm.
and all of those slasher films, and they were intensely violent. Now, I'm going to give you, since we're doing a rebooting of the topic spiritual warfare. Friday the 13th was a movie that came out in 1980. It depicted Jason Voorhees' mother going around killing camp counselors because she felt that they did not do anything about her son. Her son drowned in the lake, so she just went around killing people that she felt was responsible for that.
Mm-hmm.
So in the second one, Friday the 13th Part 2, she was beheaded. She was killed by a camp counselor, and legend said that she was killed on Friday the 13th in front of Jason. Jason was in the cabin when she was beheaded. So Part 3, you have Jason Voorhees starting where the mother left off, the serial killer, going around killing people that entered Crystal Lake or Camp Crystal Lake.
Mm-hmm.
And this would happen every Friday the 13th. Halloween, same thing with Michael Myers. Michael Myers on Halloween killed his mother and his mother and his stepsister or something like that. And he was placed in the sanitarium, but he escaped and, of course, tried to kill his sister, Laurie Strode. And so now every Halloween he would go out and kill people.
And
go
let
ahead.
me ask you, because I have been one of those people who have said I can just watch a movie just for pure entertainment value and not be connected to this stuff in any way. Like, oh, it's just a movie. It's just this. It's just that. And so, I have been there before where I've like, oh, it's just a movie. It's just entertainment. I don't take this stuff seriously. But what's the harm in it? Like, can you explain the harm in seeing these things and in watching these things and stuff like that? And before you do that, well, I'll let you explain first, and then I'll tell you a short little story. But go on.
But like I was saying before, every movie does not affect every person the same. Just like every song does not affect every person the same.
Mm-hmm.
So people are made psychologically different, or
Okay.
different psychologically. So if I'm an impressionable 15-year-old looking at a movie that depicts serial killers or depicts a serial killer just going around killing people at random, then it's going to encourage, or it's going to instill thoughts in my mind that are not good.
And it can have an effect on people who are very impressionable, people who are kind of hypersensitive to some things. But and this is the thing. This is why people should kind of be careful too, because even for those who are just like me, like, oh, this is just for entertainment, I don't really take this stuff seriously. There might be a time where you get caught off guard. And this is the story that I was going to tell you. So I was watching this movie. It was a horror movie. It was called Witch. I think it might have come out 2 years ago or something. And it was set in, like the Salem time period, Salem witch trial time period, where people were hypersensitive about witches being in communities and things of that nature. So the Puritan Massachusetts type of thing. So we understand the time frame. So in any event, there was a family who they believed, this one community believed, had witchcraft around them. So they kind of excommunicated them from the community, and they had to set up their little home and their settlement further away. So not to give the entire movie away, and it was pretty boring. Full disclosure, it was pretty boring, like, for a while. You know, you're watching it and you're like, okay, so when is anything really going to happen? So without telling the ending of the movie and all of this, there was a part where, and it caught me off guard because it was toward the end. There was a part where the young woman who was suspected of being a witch ends up speaking to what was the devil. And the devil was placed in a goat, supposedly. And so essentially at the end of the movie, there's this frame of you, and you only see her face. And she's looking at something, and then all of a sudden, you hear this voice. And the voice was so creepy and weird. And apparently it was the devil talking to her. And it really caught me off guard because I was like, whoa, I wasn't even expecting that. You know, I was like, whoa. Because basically the movie had been pretty much not that interesting, that all of a sudden that happened. But the voice was so creepy to me, and I don't know who did the voice or whatever, but it was really creepy, and it got me for a second. I was like, whoa, that actually was very weird. And so I feel like that's why people should be careful, because even though we say that these things are just entertainment and, you know, this has no effect on you and doesn't really matter, it might catch you off guard in a certain situation, and then you find yourself a little bit scared. And you're like, wait, I'm scared. Now, there was a pastor named G. Craig Lewis who talked about this in one of his sermons, and he talked about how entertainment really means detained for entry. And and you'll get into that, I'm sure, as well. And how the goal of these type of movies and these things is to make you fearful, because when you are fearful, you are susceptible for entry by some type of entity. And you can get into that.
That's what the literal term or the literal word entertainment means. If you look at it from an etymological perspective, entertainment, which means I am detained so that something can enter me, or something can detain me for entry. And that's what entertainment means. So what is entertainment? What am I being entertained by? And G. Craig Lewis really gets into it. And by the way, it's part 6 of his Truth Behind Hip Hop series, Detained for Entry. And I've seen it several times.
Me
and
too.
It's interesting. It's boring in the beginning because he goes through all these cults and the Gnosticism and all that, and I'm like, gee, Craig, that doesn't really have anything to do with the topic at hand. But go ahead. I know that's how you work.
Yeah, he builds up, but then he does get into it, and it is very interesting how all of this stuff works together. So, shout out to G. Craig Lewis, and if you all want to check out the Truth About Hip Hop series, you should, because it is good. It's informative. But go on.
Yeah, he really gets into it. He talks about a lot of the music. It's the same with music you're being entertained by devils. And there's a guy by the name of John Todd. I don't know if you've heard of him or not, but
I have.
John Todd said that, and he spoke at a church out in Elkton, Maryland. And this was in 1970. Oh, Lord. He was saved in 1972, and this sermon might have taken place in 1977. You may have to research it just to get the information right. But
Okay.
he said that the purpose of rock music was so that people can cast spells on each other. Or these rock musicians can cast spells on the unsuspecting listener. You look at, and I'm not going to get too much into it because I'm going to save all of this for the Rabbit Hole series, but I'm just going to make this one or a couple of statements actually about the song that was sung by Rihanna. It's called Diamonds in the Sky. And of course the song doesn't make sense because you're listening to it, you're listening to the lyrics, and it's on purpose because what they're doing is, and this is Elton John's quote, all of my music is written in which language? Well, what the heck is which language? Well, which language is esoteric language. It doesn't make sense in the beginning, but they all know what it means. The initiated knows what it means, what's being sung.
It's like it's in code.
Yeah, it's coded. So, for instance, how many times have you heard a song that you totally liked? You thought that the song with the music, the beat was just awesome, and you're just tapping your fingers and you're patting your toes and you're bobbing your head and you're trying to mouth the lyrics, and you have no idea what they're talking about. You have no idea what they're singing about.
Yeah.
No idea.
And you are absolutely right. There's so many times where you just hear a song, you like the melody, you like the song, and you just start singing it, and you know every single word. And that's how powerful music is. And, I had a thought about this as well, talking about music. I can remember almost every song that I've really loved. Like, if someone started playing the first couple of notes of a song, I know it and I can sing it. And even as far back as elementary school, some of the songs that we learned in elementary school, I can still sing to this day. Like, I just know it by heart. And it's something that somehow is now instilled in me. Like, I just know the songs. And this is how powerful music can be. And and even when you think about film and movies and stuff like that, even though it's stories and it's just characters that are fictitious, you connect with them and you find yourself getting very emotional watching it, and you become very invested. Like, if there's certain storylines that are sad, you will start to cry. If there's certain storylines that are meant to make you angry, you will get angry. And it really connects you to certain emotions. And that's why it's so powerful. And that's why we have to be so careful about it. So in many ways, we say, oh, it doesn't really matter. It's just this, it's just that. It actually can really matter. And you have to be careful. And I'm not saying that every time you watch a movie, something's going to jump on you or something's going to jump in you or what have you. Every time you get scared, something's going to jump in you. I'm not saying that will happen every single time, but what it's doing is opening the door. So that's what people need to be careful about. All of these things that we're talking about, we're not saying that it will happen every single time. Like, if you engage in, these like astrology or watch this show or do this or whatever, that every single time these things will happen. What we are saying is the door will be open. You're opening the door, and you therefore become a little bit more susceptible to it. So it may not be this time. It may not even be the time after, but it may be the time after that.
Well, it's true actually. You're opening a door to something that to another world, and I'm not saying this lightly, but you are opening another world to the devil. The Bible says that we should not give place to the devil, and that's what we shouldn't do. We should think on these things. The Bible says in Philippians 4, it says, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are hopeful, whatsoever things are of good report, think on these things. So, and I'm not saying you shouldn't watch movies, no, but what kind of movies should you be watching?
Mm-hmm.
And should you be watching Love and Hip Hop? Should you be watching Baby Boy? Should you be watching Scandal?
and
Empire?
These are things that, for example, it just doesn't really add to, your thinking. What's the saying? You have to protect your eyes, your ears, in what you say, and all those type of things. And as I start to get older, I start to understand the value of that and the importance of that. Really thinking about what you're ingesting into your system, and not just with food, everything, what you ingest, like who you're around. All of these things are important for your overall health, your mental health, your spiritual health, your emotional health. And, just being careful about what you see and engage in. So this stuff is very deep. And, you said that you're going to talk more about these things on your series, The Rabbit Hole, right?
Yeah, I'm going to really be getting into all of these things. Nicolas Cage, he said that he he prayed and asked a entity to get into him so he can play Ghost Rider. And he's what they call a method actor. People like Johnny Depp. Johnny Depp was involved in Satanism for I don't know how long.
Wow.
He says that he goes through demon rides. He goes on demon rides. That's what he said. And when he did Sleepy Hollow, I don't know if you've seen that. I did. I saw it with my best friend. It was filled with Satanism that it was just not even funny. And the Ninth Gate, which was filled with Satanism.
Oh, yes, the Ninth Gate. Wow.
Yeah, the Ninth Gate to the Kingdom of Shadows. How blatant can you be?
The Ninth Gate was a very interesting movie. And that's one of those movies where, if we can speak on this very quickly, and maybe you'll get more into it on your series, maybe when you have a show we can talk about this more, but that's one of those shows where it has meaning that you definitely do not understand. There were so many little messages and hidden things going on in that movie that you kind of have to really have a grasp of what it is they're talking about in order to know what was really going on, because there were things that you were seeing, and then there were things that you weren't seeing that were happening, and messages that were being communicated that you weren't really necessarily paying attention to, at least for me, because I saw this years ago when I was much younger. But it's a very interesting movie. And that one was not one to be taken lightly, very serious discussion there with things.
Yeah, there's so much occultic symbolism in that movie that I can't even begin to even call it. I mean, he the girl that was following him around throughout the show, well, throughout the movie, was in the book.
Yeah, she was in the book, and so were the twins. and various other people throughout the movie. And so you wonder, it was like kind of like a romanticized dance with the devil. The whole thing was. And it was like the devil was kind of luring him as he was trying to figure out what was going on with the book. He was starting to fall in love with the idea of the book and what it could get him. And so, and yeah, I'll just leave it there. We'll get more into that on your show. So anyways.
Yeah, it was, I saw it, and it was just, my head was spinning until I actually read the plot, and I said to myself, well, wait a minute, Johnny Depp, because as the movie was progressing along, Johnny Depp wanted to act the book, but the guy that sent him to get it for him, he got it right up until
there was one part, and
one part that he got wrong.
And I don't want to give the movie away, but I don't necessarily encourage anyone to see it, but I also don't want to just give it away either. So a few spoiler alerts here, but we'll talk more about that in the Rabbit Hole series. I look forward to that discussion, but but just to close out with everything that we're talking about, because this is a part 2 of the conversation on spiritual warfare, and make sure that you see part 1 if you haven't. But these things are real, and I talk about this in my book, because what you find out in the book is that you're in hell, and you find out the tactics and the tricks of the devil, and how everything is very much intentional, very much deliberate and controlled. And that's the part of the book that I think a lot of people were a little bit shocked about. Wait, so this isn't just something, this isn't just art, this isn't just music, this isn't just a game? No, it's not. This is a tool. Think of it as a tool that the devil is using to get to you, a tool. And so what ends up happening in the book, the demon Jade, that you all will find out more about, ends up being able to get to Earth because of what someone was doing on Earth. And you'll find out what that one character was doing on Earth that allowed Jade to get there in the first place. Because what that character, Max, and you'll find out who Max is in the book, was doing allowed Jade to get there. So it's all very deep, and it's one of those things to be mindful of, because these things are all around us. So it's kind of forcing us to navigate. And no one's saying to walk in fear or be fearful. In fact, we're saying do the exact opposite. Don't be fearful, but be aware, be knowledgeable, and be on guard, and to safeguard yourself from some of these things. Because you don't want to just stumble into something unnecessarily when you could have just been like, oh yeah, you know what, I don't really need to do that, or I don't really need to watch this, and that's it. So do you have any final words?
Well, yeah, as I said before, the Bible tells us to be sober and vigilant, for the devil is as a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour. And so we have to understand what his schemes are so we can protect ourselves against them.
Exactly.
And not be fooled, or not be taken in by his lies, because the devil is a liar. The devil is a deceiver, and his job is to kill, steal, and destroy. But Jesus said, I have come that you may have life and have it more abundantly.
And I think that is a wonderful place to end. Well, thank you all once again for tuning in. And as I've stated before, if you have not already liked and subscribed to this channel, make sure that you do, so then you can always get the latest updates on shows and what's going on. We really want to start presenting a lot of information and sharing things and just having these discussions. So thank you for all your support, and until next time.